If you enjoyed this interesting video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you even more exciting and thought-provoking content. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Join our growing community today. Your feedback, comments, and ideas truly keep this channel alive.
Chapter 1: The Birth of a Warrior, c. 1840s. In the heart of the Nyamwezi lands, amidst rolling savannas and dense forests, a boy was born around the year 1840 who would later change the destiny of East Africa. His name was Mirambo. From the beginning, he was not like other children in his village. Where others played, he observed. Where others hesitated, he acted. Born into a modest family, Mirambo's early life offered no clue that he would rise to become one of the most feared and respected warlords in the region. The Nyamwezi people lived in small communities, each ruled by local chiefs. These chiefs were warriors and traders, and the skills of leadership and combat were passed down through generations. Young Mirambo grew up listening to tales of warriors who defended their lands from invaders, protected trade caravans, and commanded armies that could strike fear into their enemies. These stories became the foundation of his ambition. He watched the elders teach young men how to wield spears, how to track game across vast plains, and how to move silently through forests. Mirambo absorbed these lessons with a sharp mind and an unrelenting curiosity. By the time he was a teenager, Mirambo was already recognized for his intelligence and daring. He excelled in hunting and warfare drills, often outpacing older boys and men. But what set him apart was not just physical skill, it was strategy. He observed the way warriors moved in formation, the timing of attacks, and the discipline needed to maintain control over a group in chaotic situations. Even at this young age, he showed an uncanny ability to predict the actions of his peers and even adults, a skill that would later make him a master of military tactics. The 1840s in East Africa were turbulent times. Trade routes crisscrossed the savannas and forests, bringing wealth but also conflict. Caravans carried ivory and other valuable goods, while slavers sought captives to sell along the coast. Chiefs who could protect these trade routes grew powerful, while those who failed risked losing their lands or even their lives. Mirambo's community was no exception. Frequent skirmishes and raids tested the resilience of every village. Young men trained for battle as much as they worked the fields, and Mirambo was often at the forefront of these exercises. As he grew, Mirambo began forming bonds with other ambitious young men who shared his vision for a stronger, united Nyamwezi state. They admired his courage and intelligence, and they followed him not just because of fear or tradition, but because they believed in his ability to lead. These friendships would later become the foundation of his elite warrior corps, the Rugaruga, an army known for discipline, strategy, and loyalty. But Mirambo's rise was not only about warfare. He understood the importance of respect, negotiation, and alliances. Even as a boy, he saw how relationships with neighboring chiefs and traders could make or break a leader's ambitions. He spent hours listening to village elders negotiate trade deals and settle disputes. He learned the subtle art of influence, the way a commanding word, a strategic gift, or a show of strength could shift the balance of power without drawing a single drop of blood. The turning point of Mirambo's early years came during a raid on a neighboring village. While other youths hesitated or panicked under pressure, Mirambo took decisive action. He rallied his peers, led a successful counterattack, and protected his community from significant loss. Word of his bravery spread across the region. Elders whispered that a leader of rare talent had emerged. Chiefs began to take notice. Even traders and travelers along the trade routes remarked on the young warrior whose name was spoken with both awe and caution. By his late teens, Mirambo had already laid the foundation for a life defined by ambition, strategy, and warfare. He was no longer just a boy of the Nyamwezi lands. He was a rising force who would one day command vast armies, control trade routes, and reshape the political landscape of East Africa. But even as he prepared for battles yet to come, Mirambo knew that the path to power was treacherous. Loyalty had to be earned, enemies could strike from unexpected directions, and every decision could mean life or death. In the golden light of dawn, as the savannah stretched endlessly before him, Mirambo's eyes reflected a mixture of determination and vision. He could see the future not just for himself, but for the Nyamwezi people under his leadership. And in that moment, a warrior was born, one whose story would echo through history as a testament to courage, strategy, and the unyielding spirit of a true leader. Chapter 2: Rise of the Rugaruga, Building a Fearless Army. As Mirambo entered his 20s, the boy who had once learned from elders and observed village skirmishes transformed into a young leader with a vision far beyond his home. The Nyamwezi lands were fragmented, ruled by small chiefs and competing factions. Trade routes, particularly those carrying ivory and slaves to the coast, were constantly contested. Mirambo recognized that to achieve true power, he needed not only courage but an army that could dominate both battlefields and negotiations. It was during this time that he created the Rugaruga, an elite corps of warriors who would become the backbone of his power. Unlike traditional militias, the Rugaruga were highly disciplined, trained not only in fighting but in strategy, coordination, and loyalty. Mirambo handpicked men who shared his vision, often choosing those who demonstrated intelligence, courage, and an unflinching sense of duty. Training was rigorous. Warriors ran across scorching savannas at dawn, practiced spear and shield drills until their muscles ached, and learned to move silently through forests. Mirambo personally supervised many drills, testing both skill and character, ensuring only the most capable remained in his ranks. Beyond physical prowess, Mirambo emphasized organization and strategy. He divided his forces into units capable of swift attack, defense, and flanking maneuvers. Scouts and messengers were trained to relay information quickly across vast territories, allowing Mirambo to anticipate enemy movements and strike decisively. Under his command, battles became more than chaotic clashes. They were calculated operations designed to overwhelm opponents. The effectiveness of the Rugaruga soon became evident. Mirambo led his first major campaign against a rival chief whose control over a lucrative trade route threatened his ambitions. The opposing forces outnumbered him, but Mirambo used terrain and intelligence to his advantage. He positioned his warriors along hidden ridges and narrow valleys, allowing his smaller force to ambush the enemy with deadly precision. Spears flew, shields clashed, and dust swirled under the midday sun as Mirambo moved among his men, shouting commands and rallying his warriors. Each gesture, each sharp instruction, was a signal that turned confusion into coordinated strength. Victory in that battle established Mirambo as a leader who combined courage with cunning. News spread quickly through the region of the Nyamwezi warlord who could defeat larger armies with skill and discipline. Traders, recognizing his growing power, began negotiating directly with him for access to vital ivory and other goods. Some chiefs, wary of his military prowess, sought alliances with him rather than risk confrontation. Mirambo's influence was expanding, not just through the battlefield, but through strategic diplomacy. But power attracted enemies. Rivals attempted ambushes, and regional chiefs conspired to check his rise. Each time, the Rugaruga proved resilient. They learned not only to fight but to anticipate threats, to regroup swiftly under pressure, and to follow Mirambo's commands with near instinctive precision. His leadership style combined strict discipline with loyalty earned through respect. He rewarded bravery, shared spoils, and treated his warriors as an extended family. This approach fostered unwavering allegiance, ensuring that even in dire moments, his army remained united. Mirambo also understood the importance of mobility. The Rugaruga were trained to march long distances, carry minimal supplies, and strike unexpectedly. They could appear where least expected, raid supply lines, or reinforce distant allies. This agility became one of Mirambo's greatest tactical advantages, allowing him to dominate not through sheer numbers, but through speed, coordination, and decisive action. As the years passed, Mirambo's reputation as a strategist and military innovator grew. Local communities viewed him with a mix of awe and fear, understanding that his influence extended far beyond the battlefield. He had transformed from a promising youth into a commander whose name alone could inspire loyalty among allies and caution among rivals. By the end of this chapter in his life, Mirambo was no longer simply a regional leader. He was a symbol of strength, discipline, and vision. The Rugaruga were ready for the larger campaigns that would define his legacy, and Mirambo's ambitions now stretched toward uniting the Nyamwezi lands and controlling the trade routes that flowed through East Africa. His story was no longer just about survival or local skirmishes. It was about shaping history through leadership, strategy, and the indomitable will of a warrior king. Chapter 3: Expanding the Empire, Alliances, Conquests, and Strategy. By the late 1860s, Mirambo had firmly established himself as a rising force in the Nyamwezi lands. His Rugaruga warriors were well-trained, disciplined, and fiercely loyal, and his early victories had earned him both respect and fear. Yet Mirambo understood that raw strength alone would not secure lasting power. To expand his influence and dominate the region, he needed more than an army. He needed alliances, strategic marriages, and control over key trade routes that connected the interior to the coastal markets. Mirambo began forging alliances with neighboring chiefs who shared his interest in stabilizing trade routes or defending their territories against external threats. While some chiefs were cautious, wary of Mirambo's growing power, he used a combination of diplomacy and displays of strength to win them over. A single demonstration of his military discipline, coupled with the promise of mutual benefit, often convinced potential allies to join his coalition. In this way, Mirambo expanded his influence without immediate bloodshed, turning rival factions into partners, or at least temporary allies. At the same time, Mirambo pursued strategic marriages, linking his family to influential Nyamwezi and neighboring clans. These alliances strengthened his political network, giving him access to additional warriors, resources, and intelligence about rivals' movements. Mirambo understood that leadership was as much about relationships and perception as it was about victory in battle. His rise was deliberate, combining careful diplomacy with a reputation for decisive action. Yet not all challenges could be solved with words or alliances. Several rival chiefs, unwilling to acknowledge Mirambo's growing dominance, plotted to undermine him. Raids on his villages and attempts to disrupt trade routes tested his leadership and the capabilities of the Rugaruga. Mirambo responded swiftly, demonstrating the effectiveness of his military innovations. Scouts would track enemy movements through forests and savanna, while swift flanking attacks by disciplined units turned potential ambushes into decisive victories. His ability to command large groups in chaotic situations became legendary, and every successful campaign reinforced the percept that Mirambo was unstoppable. Mirambo also began to consolidate power by controlling the ivory and slave trade routes that crisscrossed the region. Caravans moving through Urambo now needed his approval for safe passage. This economic control allowed him to secure wealth, which he used to fund his army, reward loyal warriors, and strengthen alliances. European and Arab traders who had previously bypassed the region now had to negotiate directly with him. In his hands, trade became not just a source of wealth, but a tool of political leverage. The Rugaruga continued to grow in both size and sophistication. Mirambo trained his men in combined tactics. Some units would engage the enemy head-on, while others maneuvered to strike from the flanks or rear. Scouts relayed intelligence in real time, and warriors could execute complex maneuvers even under the stress of battle. These innovations allowed Mirambo to defeat larger armies with fewer men, cementing his reputation as a military genius. Despite his growing power, Mirambo never lost sight of the human element of leadership. He maintained close relationships with his warriors, often sharing in the hardships of long campaigns and personally recognizing acts of courage. This approach created fierce loyalty. His men fought not just for victory, but for their leader, who inspired both respect and admiration. Mirambo's campaigns also sent a clear message to the broader region. The Nyamwezi lands were no longer fragmented and vulnerable. Under his leadership, a strong, centralized authority was emerging, capable of resisting external threats and commanding the respect of traders and rival chiefs alike. His vision was no longer limited to his home territory. It encompassed a network of alliances, fortified positions, and economic control that stretched across East Africa. By the end of this chapter in his life, Mirambo had transformed from a talented young warrior into a regional power broker, military strategist, and master of diplomacy. His victories on the battlefield, combined with careful alliances and control over trade routes, set the stage for even greater ambitions. Yet the challenges ahead were far from over. Rival chiefs, traders, and even foreign powers would test his authority, forcing Mirambo to continually innovate and adapt in order to maintain his supremacy. The Nyamwezi lands had never seen a leader like him, a warrior who could command armies, negotiate with allies, and strategize like a seasoned general. Mirambo's story was becoming legend, a tale of courage, intelligence, and the relentless pursuit of power that would shape the future of East Africa. Chapter 4: Master of the Battlefield, Strategic Victories and Dominance. By the early 1870s, Mirambo had transformed the Nyamwezi lands into a rising power in East Africa. His Rugaruga warriors were disciplined, loyal, and feared across the region. Yet Mirambo knew that true authority required more than alliances and trade control. It demanded victories on the battlefield that would send an unmistakable message to friends and rivals alike. This chapter of his life marked the era when his strategic genius and tactical brilliance reshaped the political landscape of the region. Mirambo's approach to warfare was revolutionary for his time. While many chiefs relied on sheer numbers or brute force, he emphasized mobility, intelligence, and precision. He understood the terrain intimately. Savannas, forests, and river crossings became tools of strategy. Scouts were dispatched ahead of the main army to gather information on enemy movements, and units were trained to react instantly to changing circumstances. Battles under Mirambo's command were carefully choreographed yet allowed for flexibility, enabling his forces to adapt to unforeseen developments without losing cohesion. One of the defining campaigns of this period was against a coalition of rival chiefs who had joined forces to challenge his authority. Their armies vastly outnumbered Mirambo's, but he used deception and terrain to his advantage. He sent smaller units to feign retreat, drawing the enemy into narrow valleys where his main forces lay in ambush. Spears and arrows rained down as warriors charged from hidden positions, turning the enemy's superior numbers into a liability. Dust rose in thick clouds, horses galloped across open fields, and the sound of battle echoed across the savannah. Amidst the chaos, Mirambo moved confidently among his warriors, shouting commands, repositioning units, and inspiring courage. His ability to maintain order under pressure became the stuff of legend. Victory in this campaign solidified Mirambo's reputation as a military mastermind. Chiefs who had once doubted him now sought alliances, traders approached with caution and respect, and local communities recognized his growing authority. Yet Mirambo's rise was not purely about defeating enemies, it was about creating a state that could endure. He used each victory to reinforce his control over territories, integrate new warriors into the Rugaruga, and secure vital trade routes. Wealth from ivory and other goods funded further campaigns and allowed him to reward loyalty and bravery among his men. Mirambo's leadership style was as much about inspiration as discipline. He fought alongside his warriors when necessary, sharing the dangers of battle, yet he also commanded with a strategic mind that earned respect. Every gesture, from signaling a flanking maneuver to rallying a wavering unit, demonstrated both authority and tactical intelligence. Warriors trusted him implicitly because they saw not just a commander, but a leader who understood every detail of war. During this period, Mirambo also began fortifying key villages and trade centers. Defensive positions were established along major routes, and watchtowers and outposts allowed him to monitor rival movements. His combination of offensive campaigns and defensive preparation made it nearly impossible for enemies to catch him off guard. Even those who opposed him often realized that confrontation would be costly, reinforcing his influence without a single additional battle. The Rugaruga themselves became legendary. They moved with precision, reacting to Mirambo's signals like extensions of his own will. Cavalry units executed rapid strikes, infantry held firm in tight formations, and scouts ensured that no enemy maneuver went unnoticed. This level of coordination was unmatched in the region, and it allowed Mirambo to dominate battles even when outnumbered. By the mid-1870s, Mirambo had secured a network of territories stretching across much of central Nyamwezi lands. His power rested not only on the strength of his army but also on his strategic alliances, control over trade, and the loyalty he inspired in his warriors. Chiefs, traders, and rival warlords had come to accept that Mirambo was not merely a regional power but a force that could define the future of East Africa. As the sun set over the savannah, dust swirling in the orange glow, Mirambo would often stand on a ridge, surveying the lands he had brought under his influence. In his mind, he was already planning the next campaigns, the next alliances, the next steps that would ensure his place in history. His victories were not just battles won, they were the foundation of a legacy, one built on courage, strategy, and the unshakable spirit of a warrior king. Mirambo had become more than a warlord, he was a symbol of power, discipline, and vision. And yet, the challenges ahead, new rivals, shifting alliances, and the arrival of foreign interests, would test his leadership and shape the next chapter of his extraordinary life. Chapter 5: Power and Politics, Confronting Traitors and Rivals. By the mid-1870s, Mirambo had transformed from a regional warlord into a powerful ruler whose influence extended across central Nyamwezi lands. His Rugaruga warriors were disciplined, his territory secure, and his reputation as a strategist unmatched. Yet Mirambo knew that military strength alone could not guarantee lasting power. The region's complex trade networks, particularly those dominated by Arab traders along the coast and interior, demanded careful navigation. To expand his influence further, Mirambo needed to master the delicate balance between force, negotiation, and political maneuvering. Trade in ivory and slaves had become a lifeline for both wealth and power. Caravans moving through the Nyamwezi lands carried valuable goods destined for the coast, where European and Arab traders eagerly awaited their arrival. Controlling these routes meant not only economic advantage, but also leverage over neighboring chiefs. Mirambo recognized this early, using a combination of military intimidation and diplomacy to assert authority over key trade corridors. Conflicts with Arab traders arose when some attempted to bypass his control, taking routes that undermined his influence. Mirambo responded decisively. Scouts monitored caravan movements, and Rugaruga units would strategically block routes or stage swift ambushes to redirect trade through territories he controlled. Unlike simple raids, these operations demonstrated Mirambo's strategic genius. He exercised authority without unnecessary destruction, signaling both strength and intelligence. His reputation spread along the trade networks, and traders soon understood that negotiating with Mirambo was far safer, and often more profitable, than attempting to ignore him. At the same time, rival Nyamwezi chiefs, wary of his growing power, began forming coalitions to challenge him. Mirambo's response was a blend of diplomacy and calculated military action. Some chiefs were brought into alliances through gifts, shared wealth, and promises of mutual protection. Others, who resisted, faced precise military campaigns that neutralized their power without destabilizing the region. These operations often involved rapid movements of his Rugaruga, flanking maneuvers, and careful coordination, demonstrating that Mirambo's army was as adept at strategy as it was at combat. Mirambo's political acumen extended beyond immediate rivals. He maintained relationships with local communities, respecting traditions and rewarding loyalty. Villagers who supported his campaigns received protection and economic benefits, while those who opposed him often reconsidered their stance after witnessing his ability to combine military force with justice. This approach strengthened his internal base of support, ensuring that the territories under his influence were not just conquered, but stabilized. Amidst these political and economic maneuvers, Mirambo continued to expand the reach of the Rugaruga. He trained new warriors in the same rigorous methods that had made his army legendary: precision drills, endurance exercises, and battlefield simulations. Scouts learned to read the land, predict enemy movements, and relay intelligence with speed that rivaled any opponent. Every member of the Rugaruga understood their role within a larger strategy, and their cohesion became a cornerstone of Mirambo's dominance. One notable encounter during this period involved a group of traders allied with a rival chief attempting to bypass Mirambo's control. Using intelligence gathered by scouts, Mirambo orchestrated a night ambush. Warriors silently positioned themselves along a narrow river crossing, while Mirambo personally led a mounted flanking unit. When the enemy caravan arrived, the Rugaruga struck with precision, spears and shields in coordinated assault, horses charging from multiple angles. The traders were forced to surrender without significant bloodshed, and the incident reinforced Mirambo's reputation as both a tactician and a leader who demanded respect. Mirambo's growing authority also allowed him to influence political structures within the region. Chiefs who had once acted independently now recognized the benefit of cooperation under his leadership. Through alliances, marriage ties, and economic control, Mirambo created a network of loyalty that extended far beyond his immediate territories. His combination of military brilliance and political foresight ensured that his influence was both broad and resilient. By the end of this period, Mirambo had established himself as more than a warlord. He was a statesman, strategist, and economic power broker. His leadership extended from the battlefield to the council, from trade routes to village communities, creating a foundation that would endure even amidst the challenges that lay ahead. The Nyamwezi lands were now united under a strong authority, and Mirambo's name carried weight across East Africa. As he stood atop a ridge, surveying caravans moving safely along trade routes he controlled, Mirambo's vision stretched far beyond his current achievements. He saw a future where his influence would shape the destiny of the region, where the strength of the Rugaruga and the loyalty of his allies would secure a legacy that would be remembered for generations. Chapter 6: Campaigns of Conquest. Mirambo's military genius. By the late 1870s, Mirambo had secured his position as one of the most formidable leaders in East Africa. His Rugaruga warriors were legendary, and his influence over trade routes and neighboring territories was well established. Yet the ambitions of Mirambo extended beyond maintaining control. He sought to expand his domain, unify more Nyamwezi lands, and assert dominance over rival chiefs who still resisted his authority. This period marked the height of his military campaigns, a time when his strategic genius and leadership skills were tested on multiple fronts. Mirambo's approach to warfare was methodical and innovative. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he relied on intelligence, reconnaissance, and careful planning rather than brute force alone. Scouts would travel ahead to monitor enemy movements, mapping terrain features and identifying weaknesses in rival defenses. The Rugaruga were trained to operate as a cohesive unit, executing complex maneuvers under pressure and reacting instantly to changing battlefield conditions. Mirambo himself often led from the front, demonstrating both courage and command, inspiring his warriors with his presence. One significant campaign during this period involved a coalition of rebellious chiefs who had united to challenge his authority. They controlled key territories along major trade routes, and their combined forces outnumbered Mirambo's army. Yet he turned this disadvantage into an opportunity. Using a combination of feigned retreats, ambushes, and flanking attacks, he lured enemy forces into narrow valleys and choke points where their numbers became a liability. Chapter 6: Campaigns of Conquest. Mirambo's military genius. By the late 1870s, Mirambo had secured his position as one of the most formidable leaders in East Africa. His Rugaruga warriors were legendary, and his influence over trade routes and neighboring territories was well established. Yet the ambitions of Mirambo extended beyond maintaining control. He sought to expand his domain, unify more Nyamwezi lands, and assert dominance over rival chiefs who still resisted his authority. This period marked the height of his military campaigns, a time when his strategic genius and leadership skills were tested on multiple fronts. Mirambo's approach to warfare was methodical and innovative. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he relied on intelligence, reconnaissance, and careful planning rather than brute force alone. Scouts would travel ahead to monitor enemy movements, mapping terrain features and identifying weaknesses in rival defenses. The Rugaruga were trained to operate as a cohesive unit, executing complex maneuvers under pressure and reacting instantly to changing battlefield conditions. Mirambo himself often led from the front, demonstrating both courage and command, inspiring his warriors with his presence. One significant campaign during this period involved a coalition of rebellious chiefs who had united to challenge his authority. They controlled key territories along major trade routes, and their combined forces outnumbered Mirambo's army. Yet he turned this disadvantage into an opportunity. Using a combination of feigned retreats, ambushes, and flanking attacks, he lured enemy forces into narrow valleys and choke points where their numbers became a liability. Spears clashed, shields splintered, and the ground shook under the galloping horses of his cavalry. Mirambo moved swiftly among his troops, issuing precise commands, repositioning units, and ensuring every warrior knew their role. By the end of the engagement, his enemies were decisively defeated, their forces scattered, and their control over key territories eliminated. These victories were not just about territory, they were demonstrations of Mirambo's mastery of military strategy. Chiefs across the region took note. To oppose him was to risk annihilation, while alliances offered safety, profit, and prestige. Mirambo skillfully combined force and diplomacy, integrating defeated warriors into the Rugaruga or forming alliances that expanded his influence without unnecessary bloodshed. This balance of fear and respect became a hallmark of his leadership. Mirambo also understood the importance of economic power and sustaining military dominance. Control over trade routes allowed him to secure wealth, which he used to equip his army, reward loyalty, and fortify strategic locations. Caravans carrying ivory and other goods now moved under his protection, and traders, both local and foreign, recognized that Mirambo's authority was absolute along the routes he controlled. These economic advantages further strengthened his position, making him not only a military leader but also a powerful political and economic force in East Africa. During this period, Mirambo faced not only external threats but also internal challenges. Managing a growing army and newly acquired territories required careful organization. He established command hierarchies within the Rugaruga, assigning trusted lieutenants to oversee different units, maintain discipline, and implement his strategies across dispersed regions. Communication was critical. Messengers and scouts ensured that he could direct operations over vast distances, maintaining cohesion even during complex campaigns. The psychological aspect of his leadership was equally important. Mirambo's presence on the battlefield inspired loyalty and courage among his warriors. He shared the dangers of combat, personally encouraging those who faltered, and celebrating acts of bravery with rewards and recognition. His leadership fostered a sense of unity and purpose, transforming the Rugaruga into more than an army. They became a disciplined, loyal force bound by respect and trust in their commander. By the end of this era of campaigns, Mirambo had expanded his influence across much of central Nyamwezi lands. His victories reshaped the political map, bringing previously independent or rival territories under his control. Chiefs, traders, and villagers recognized his authority, and his reputation spread throughout East Africa as a warrior of unmatched skill, a strategist of extraordinary vision, and a leader whose presence commanded respect. Yet despite these accomplishments, Mirambo's journey was far from complete. As his power grew, new challenges emerged, rival chiefs seeking revenge, foreign traders and explorers arriving in the region, and the ever-present threat of rebellion within his own territories. Each challenge would test not only his military genius but also his ability to govern, negotiate, and maintain loyalty across a rapidly expanding realm. In the golden haze of a late afternoon savanna, Mirambo would often observe the lands he had brought under his command, contemplating the next steps in his campaign to unite the Nyamwezi people and secure his legacy. His story was no longer just one of battles won, it was the rise of a leader who combined courage, strategy, and vision to shape the destiny of East Africa. Chapter 7: Apex of Power, Rivalries and Regional Dominance. By the early 1880s, Mirambo had reached the apex of his power. His Rugaruga warriors were a disciplined force feared across the Nyamwezi lands, and his network of alliances, fortified trade routes, and controlled territories marked him as one of East Africa's most formidable leaders. Yet with great power came great challenges. Mirambo now faced rival chiefs determined to reclaim lost influence, Arab traders seeking to circumvent his control, and the increasing attention of foreign explorers and merchants drawn to the wealth of the region. His leadership, strategy, and tactical genius were tested like never before. Mirambo's dominance was built on a combination of military precision and political intelligence. He maintained tight control over the Rugaruga, continually training new recruits while reinforcing the loyalty of his seasoned warriors. Drills and battlefield exercises were rigorous, ensuring that each man understood not only how to fight but also how to execute complex maneuvers in chaotic conditions. His scouts scoured the lands, monitoring movements of rival chiefs, caravans, and potential threats. Mirambo's ability to process intelligence quickly and make decisive judgments became the cornerstone of his military supremacy. One of the major challenges during this period came from Arab traders who had long dominated the ivory and slave trade. Some attempted to bypass Mirambo's control, organizing caravans that avoided his territories or negotiating secretly with rival chiefs. Mirambo responded with calculated campaigns, swift raids on uncooperative caravans, strategic blockades of trade routes, and targeted strikes on allied rival chiefs. Yet he did not rely on brute force alone. Mirambo also leveraged negotiation, offering protection and mutual benefit to traders willing to recognize his authority. By blending coercion with diplomacy, he ensured that economic power remained firmly in his hands. Conflict with rival chiefs continued to define Mirambo's leadership. Some, resentful of his authority, attempted to unite against him, believing that his power could be broken by coalition. Mirambo anticipated these moves. He used intelligence gathered by scouts to disrupt alliances before they solidified, launching rapid and coordinated strikes that prevented his enemies from mounting effective resistance. Battles under his command became lessons in strategy. Flanking maneuvers, ambushes, and precise positioning of forces allowed the Rugaruga to defeat larger armies with minimal losses. Mirambo's reputation as a battlefield genius spread not only among locals but also to traders and explorers from distant lands. Mirambo's leadership extended beyond combat. He recognized the importance of internal governance, ensuring that newly conquered territories remained stable. Chiefs who submitted were integrated into his network of allies, villages were protected, and trade continued under organized oversight. This combination of military enforcement and administrative control prevented rebellion and solidified Mirambo's influence over a rapidly expanding domain. The psychological impact of Mirambo's presence was as powerful as his military skill. Warriors fought with extraordinary loyalty, inspired by a leader who shared in their hardships and celebrated their bravery. Mirambo moved among his troops during battles, issuing commands, repositioning units, and maintaining morale. His personal involvement in the field ensured that his army remained cohesive, even during chaotic engagements where lesser commanders might have faltered. By the time of his greatest campaigns, Mirambo had transformed the political landscape of the region. He controlled the majority of central Nyamwezi lands, dominated key trade routes, and maintained a loyal, elite army capable of rapid response. Chiefs who had once challenged him now sought alliances, understanding that Mirambo's power was both overwhelming and enduring. Even Arab traders who had once circumvented him were forced to negotiate on his terms. His influence was a combination of respect, fear, and strategic genius that few could match. Despite his success, Mirambo faced constant pressures. Rivals never ceased to plot, the trade networks were always contested, and maintaining loyalty among a growing army required careful attention. He knew that power could be fragile if mismanaged, and he devoted equal energy to governance, intelligence, and diplomacy as he did to warfare. As he surveyed the lands from a high ridge, Mirambo saw not just the territories under his control but also the challenges that still lay ahead. His vision extended beyond immediate conquests. He sought to create a legacy of leadership, discipline, and unity among the Nyamwezi people. His life had become a testament to the combination of courage, intelligence, an unyielding ambition that defined a true warrior king. At the peak of his power, Mirambo had become more than a military commander. He was a strategist, a diplomat, and a ruler whose authority reshaped the region. His story, forged in battle and tempered through alliances and governance, would echo across East Africa long after the dust of the savannah settled from his campaigns. Chapter 8: Trials of Power, Internal Strife and External Threats. By the early 1880s, Mirambo's empire had reached an impressive scale. His Ruga army was disciplined, loyal, and feared, his control over trade routes brought wealth, and his alliances with neighboring chiefs solidified his authority. Yet with expansion came new challenges. Maintaining such a vast network of territories, warriors, and allies required constant vigilance. Internal strife, rivalries among his own lieutenants, and increasing pressure from Arab traders and distant foreign powers began to test the limits of his leadership. Mirambo had always relied on loyalty and respect to command his army and govern his territories. However, as his domain grew, the complexity of managing multiple regions and diverse groups became apparent. Some of his lieutenants, ambitious and skilled in their own right, began to challenge decisions or seek greater authority. Mirambo dealt with these tensions with a careful mix of discipline, negotiation, and demonstration of authority. Those who remained loyal were rewarded with status and wealth, while dissenters were either integrated into the command structure or removed from positions of influence. This delicate balance was crucial to maintaining cohesion in his rapidly expanding empire. At the same time, Arab traders continued to test his control over the lucrative ivory and slave routes. Some sought alliances with rival chiefs, attempting to bypass Mirambo's authority or undermine his influence. Intelligence networks and scouts became more important than ever. Mirambo personally oversaw operations to intercept uncooperative caravans and secure key crossings, using swift cavalry strikes and coordinated infantry attacks to enforce his dominance. These operations were precise, avoiding unnecessary destruction while sending a clear message: the Ruga were disciplined, ruthless, and effective. External threats were not limited to trade conflicts. Neighboring chiefs, envious of Mirambo's power and fearful of his influence, sometimes attempted coordinated attacks on his territories. His tactical genius was tested in multiple simultaneous engagements, where his ability to direct forces across vast distances became critical. Flanking maneuvers, ambushes, and controlled retreats allowed the Ruga to neutralize threats, even when outnumbered. Mirambo's leadership shone brightest in these moments, his calm presence and strategic foresight inspiring his warriors to act decisively under pressure. Despite these challenges, Mirambo also recognized the importance of fostering stability and loyalty among the local population. Villages under his control were protected from raids and given access to trade, ensuring that common people supported his rule. This dual approach of military strength and civil governance reinforced his influence, making it difficult for rivals to undermine his authority. He understood that an empire could not rely solely on fear. Respect and practical benefits were equally important. During this period, some of Mirambo's campaigns involved rapid marches across difficult terrain, surprise attacks, and the coordination of multiple Ruga units. Horses thundered across savannas, warriors charged through forests, and spears clashed with enemy shields in carefully orchestrated battles. Mirambo's personal presence on the battlefield, directing attacks, rallying troops, and making split-second strategic decisions, was key to maintaining the effectiveness of his army. Each victory reinforced both his authority and the loyalty of his warriors. However, even with military brilliance and political skill, the pressures of empire weighed heavily. Constant vigilance was required to prevent rebellion, maintain alliances, and control trade networks. Every decision carried risks, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. Mirambo's ability to balance these pressures demonstrated not just strength but wisdom, an understanding of power that went beyond the battlefield. By the end of this chapter in his life, Mirambo's influence remained unmatched in central Nyamwezi lands. Yet the challenges he faced, the ambitions of subordinates, rival chiefs plotting in secret, and the pressures of trade and governance, foreshadowed the trials that would test the limits of his reign. His story was no longer simply about battles won, it was about sustaining an empire, managing human ambition, and navigating the complex web of loyalty and power that defined the region. As the sun set over the savannah, Mirambo would often stand atop a ridge, observing his lands and contemplating the challenges ahead. He knew that the true test of leadership lay not just in conquest, but in preserving authority and ensuring the stability of an empire built through courage, strategy, and the unwavering loyalty of his warriors. Chapter 9: The Final Campaigns, Trials of Leadership and Legacy. By the early 1880s, Mirambo's power had reached unprecedented heights. His Rugaruga warriors were seasoned, disciplined, and feared across central Nyamwezi lands. Trade routes were firmly under his control, and his network of alliances had expanded to include both local chiefs and influential traders. Yet even the most formidable empires face moments of challenge, and for Mirambo, this period would test his leadership, resilience, and the enduring loyalty of his warriors. Rival chiefs, still resentful of past defeats, began plotting more aggressively. Some formed coalitions designed to challenge Mirambo's authority directly, while others sought to exploit minor disputes within his network of allies. Arab traders, ever attuned to opportunities for profit, occasionally attempted to bypass his control, transporting ivory and goods through territories outside his direct reach. Mirambo recognized that failure to respond swiftly could weaken the foundation of his empire. In response, he orchestrated a series of decisive campaigns. Using intelligence gathered by his scouts, Mirambo identified vulnerable points in enemy defenses. His Rugaruga units moved rapidly across the savannah, combining mounted charges with well-timed infantry maneuvers. Battles were characterized by precise coordination. One unit would engage the enemy directly, another would flank, while a third blocked potential retreats. Dust rose in clouds as warriors and horses thundered across the plains, spears clashing against shields in choreographed intensity. Mirambo himself often led from the front, shouting commands, rallying troops, and demonstrating the courage that had earned their unwavering loyalty. These final campaigns were not just about conquest, they were about consolidating power. Chiefs who had resisted him were either defeated or integrated into his network through diplomacy, marriage alliances, or mutual economic agreements. Villages within contested areas were fortified and protected, ensuring stability and loyalty. Mirambo's understanding of the delicate balance between force and diplomacy allowed him to maintain authority even in regions previously hostile to his rule. Economic control remained a critical element of his strategy. By securing key trade routes and negotiating directly with traders, Mirambo ensured a steady flow of wealth to fund his army and reinforce loyalty among allies. Wealth was distributed strategically, rewarding bravery, securing allegiance, and maintaining stability. In doing so, Mirambo demonstrated that true leadership extended beyond the battlefield. Administration, resource management, and political negotiation were as vital to his empire as victory in war. Yet even as he achieved these successes, the pressures of leadership weighed heavily. Constant vigilance was required to maintain the loyalty of the Rugaruga, to manage rival chiefs, and to monitor trade networks. Ambition within his own ranks, combined with the ever-present threat of rebellion or external attack, meant that Mirambo could never afford complacency. His ability to balance these pressures became a defining feature of his leadership. One of the most significant challenges came in the form of rival coalitions attempting to seize control of territories along crucial trade corridors. Mirambo responded with unmatched strategic brilliance. Scouts identified the enemy's positions, and he orchestrated night maneuvers that caught opponents off guard. Cavalry units executed rapid strikes while infantry secured key passes and villages. The battles were fierce, the outcomes uncertain, but the discipline and loyalty of the Rugaruga, combined with Mirambo's tactical insight, ensured success. Victory reinforced his reputation as a commander whose combination of courage, intelligence, and foresight made him nearly invincible. Despite his military dominance, Mirambo never lost sight of governance. he continued to integrate conquered territories, protect local communities, and manage trade relations. This comprehensive approach strengthened his empire, ensuring that victories were sustainable rather than fleeting. His legacy was not only that of a warrior but also that of a leader capable of uniting diverse lands under a single, disciplined authority. By the mid-1880s, Mirambo's influence extended across central Nyamwezi lands, and his story had become legendary. Villagers, warriors, chiefs, and traders alike recognized his authority, and his reputation reached beyond East Africa, carried by those who had witnessed his skill and determination. Yet, even at the height of his power, Mirambo knew that every empire faced challenges, and that sustaining loyalty, economic control, and military dominance required constant vigilance. As the sun set over the vast savanna, Mirambo often surveyed the lands he had united, contemplating both the achievements of his campaigns and the responsibilities that still lay ahead. His life, forged through courage, strategy, and unwavering leadership, was a testament to the possibilities of vision, discipline, and the relentless pursuit of power. Though battles remained and challenges persisted, his name had already become synonymous with authority, tactical brilliance, and the enduring spirit of the Nyamwezi people. Chapter 10: Legacy of a Warrior, Mirambo's Final Years and Enduring Influence. By the mid-1880s, Mirambo had become one of the most formidable figures in East Africa. His empire stretched across central Nyamwezi lands, his Rugaruga army remained disciplined and loyal, and his control over trade routes had solidified both wealth and authority. Yet even the strongest leaders must eventually confront the inevitability of change, and Mirambo's final years were marked by both the consolidation of his legacy and the challenges that accompany a life lived at the center of power. Despite his formidable military and political accomplishments, Mirambo's health began to decline in the early 1880s. Years of constant campaigning, the stress of leadership, and the rigors of life on the battlefield had taken a toll. Yet even in illness, he remained deeply involved in the governance of his empire. Advisors and lieutenants brought reports from distant territories, and Mirambo continued to direct military movements, negotiate alliances, and oversee trade agreements. His ability to make strategic decisions, even while weakened, underscored the extraordinary nature of his leadership. In these final years, Mirambo focused increasingly on ensuring the continuity of his empire. He reinforced alliances with loyal chiefs, strategically positioned trusted lieutenants across key territories, and strengthened fortifications along critical trade routes. His goal was clear: to preserve the stability and prosperity of the lands he had fought so hard to unite. While ambitious rivals still posed threats, Mirambo's careful planning created a structure capable of surviving beyond his own lifetime. The Rugaruga continued to serve as the backbone of his authority. Even as Mirambo's personal presence on the battlefield became less frequent, the training, discipline, and loyalty he had instilled ensured that the army remained an effective force. Scouts and messengers relayed information swiftly, and officers executed complex maneuvers that reflected the strategic principles Mirambo had championed. His influence had transformed the way warfare was conducted in the region, leaving a lasting mark on military organization and tactics. Economically, Mirambo's empire remained a hub of trade. Control over ivory and slave routes allowed him to maintain wealth and influence, which he used not only to support his army but also to reward loyal allies and secure the loyalty of local communities. His governance ensured that villages were protected, trade thrived, and his authority was recognized far and wide. Even in his final years, Mirambo understood that power was sustained not merely through conquest, but through the careful management of people, resources, and relationships. Yet as his life approached its conclusion, Mirambo faced the natural challenge that every leader must confront: mortality. On the battlefield, in councils, and across his territories, he had demonstrated courage, strategic brilliance, and unwavering determination. Now, the focus shifted to legacy. He imparted knowledge to his lieutenants, advised loyal chiefs, and ensured that systems were in place to prevent immediate chaos after his passing. His leadership was defined not just by victories, but by the enduring structures he left behind. Mirambo's death in 1884 marked the end of an era, but it did not diminish the influence he had established. His reputation as a warrior, strategist, and unifier of the Nyamwezi lands persisted long after his passing. Stories of his campaigns, the loyalty of the Rugaruga, and the precision of his military tactics became legend, passed down through generations. Chiefs, traders, and communities remembered him as a leader who combined courage with wisdom, discipline with diplomacy, and ambition with careful governance. The broader impact of Mirambo's life extended beyond immediate political power. He had transformed the social, economic, and military landscape of central Nyamwezi lands, creating a model of leadership that would influence subsequent generations. His approach to alliances, trade control, and military organization became a reference point for other leaders in East Africa, demonstrating how vision, strategy, and personal courage could elevate a warrior into a lasting statesman. As the sun set over the savannas of Urambo, the lands Mirambo had unified stood as a testament to his life. Villages, trade routes, and disciplined armies reflected his vision, while the stories told by elders preserved his memory. Mirambo's life was a story of resilience, intelligence, and unyielding determination, a testament to what one individual could achieve through courage, leadership, and a deep understanding of both people and power. In the end, Mirambo's legacy was not merely the territories he controlled or the battles he won. It was the enduring influence he had over a region, the loyalty he inspired in warriors and allies, and the model of leadership he left behind. His story, a combination of strategy, courage, and vision, continues to be remembered as one of the defining chapters in the history of East Africa.